Yes, thank you. Yes. Well, good evening and welcome. For those of you who are just joining us, we're having our big annual Mystery Writers Conference this weekend. So many of the people here in the audience are mystery writers, either published or pre-published, but all writers. And we welcome all of our mystery writers here. For those of you who are not part of the conference, we welcome you too. And we thank you for coming tonight. And we thank everybody here for supporting Book Passage and for supporting your local independent bookstore.
Yes!
For those of us who live here in Marin County, this also serves as sort of a community center for the writers because it gets us out of the house and we have a place to go. So, welcome. It's a big privilege for me. My name is Sheldon Siegel, and I've been given the honor of introducing these two extraordinary writers tonight, and I almost winged Cara right there with me. It's a very slick presentation here tonight. But we have Anne Perry and Cara Black tonight, and I don't want to make real long introductions, even though I could talk for 20 minutes about how I admired all of their work. But let me just say a couple of things, and then I'm going to turn it over. I've known Cara for years, by the way. She and I have sort of grown up within the book industry at about the same time and rate, and we are both alums of this mystery conference. So it's nice to be in the business with you. And I just met Anne earlier today, and we thank you for coming all the way from over the other side of the pond. Well,
and I have been here before several times. So
well,
it's you that wasn't here. No. Sorry.
It's okay.
But I have been here a few times, and this particular shop has always been very good to me for many years.
Well, we're delighted to have you. For those of you, and I don't know that I need a long introduction, but Anne is, of course, the New York Times best-selling author of 2 acclaimed series set in Victorian England, the William Monk novels, including Dark Assassin, Shifting Tide, and the Charlotte and Thomas Pitt novels, including The Cater Street Hangman, Calendar Square, Buckingham Palace Gardens, Beckingham. I can't read my own writing.
I know that.
Yes.
Blackhouse, I read what the Queen is.
Yes. Her latest, hold up the book. Her latest is called Death on Blackheath, and she's gonna talk about that with Cara tonight. It's a Thomas Pitt novel. We're very, very pleased that we have a chance to talk about that tonight. I'm not going to say much about it because I'm going to let her tell you about it. To Anne's left is Cara Black, my friend and colleague and cohort in crime. She is the New York Times best-selling author of 14 novels now, right? Featuring Parisian private investigator Amy LeDuc. She's the smartest author in this whole conference because she gets to write off 2 trips to Paris every year. I'm an idiot. I write books set in San Francisco. But I get to write off the bridge toll.
Probably about the same amount.
If you haven't read Cara's stuff, you really should try it out. This is the new one. It's truly wonderful stuff. I'm going to turn this over. Let me just add one thing. The New York Times Book Review said about Murder in Pigalle, the stylish sleuth on Cara Black's blithe mystery set in Paris is making an odd fashion statement in Murder in Pigalle, ill-fitting frocks and high heels, almost 6 months pregnant and showing it. But once the investigation takes a detour into the cavernous sewers of the city, she proves she can still find her way home in the dark. Is that nice? It is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome to Book Passage tonight Anne Perry and Cara Black.
Thank you, Sheldon, and bonjour, or bonsoir, and bienvenue, and welcome, however you say it, in Scottish. I was going to say.
I don't know. I'm really going to stay in English.
Yes, you are.
I speak the language better. I read then Scottish.
I only know haggis, but
it's delicious.
Oh, okay.
I won't tell you what's in it, but it's delicious.
You can buy it in cans.
I beg your pardon?
You can buy it in cans.
Oh, that's not the real.
I'm just saying.
Well, I want to thank Book Passage and this mystery conference, and thank all of you fans of Anne who came here tonight, and the fans of Anne who are also writers here at Book Passage tonight in our Book Passage Mystery Conference. I'm an alum. I came to the first Book Passage Mystery Conference 21 years ago. Yes, and the next one 20 years ago. So, but I still feel like I'm sitting on this side with you, actually, a lot of the time. So, but now I have to be grown up and talk with Anne about her books. So you've written 80 books.
About that.
And not only the Monk series and Pigs, you've done some Christmas novellas.
Yes, that's still Victorian. And I've got 2 fantasies and 5 books set in World War I and a couple set in revolutionary Paris. But unfortunately my American editor said nobody's interested in that in America. I can't bear it. Wrote it anyway. And 1 set in medieval Byzantium.
Wow. See, you learn things all the time. We're doing what Jackie said, we're learning. Will you tell us, please, about the first time that you were ever paid for writing?
This is an embarrassing story. I didn't mention this. My dear friend Victoria mentioned this one. I was about 5. And, you know, little girls of 5 mostly look pretty good. I used to have corn yellow hair and blue eyes and pink cheeks and a little pink smock dress and little Mary Jane shoes. And I was coming back from school. And it was safe for little kids like that to walk home alone at that particular time. Shows you how long ago it was, doesn't it? And I had been given 6pence to get, I don't know, school lunch or something, but I hadn't spent it. I don't know why not. That's too far to remember, I don't like to think. But I was walking home, and there was a big, big boy behind me, and he had a stick. He must have been about 11 or 12, you know? And he said to me that he would hit me with his stick if I didn't give him my 6pence. So I told him this long story about how hungry we were at home and hadn't any shoes. And the front cover of Kids Vogue, you know. And it's this long, long story about how sad it all was. And he ended up giving me half a crown. Which, for those of you who don't know British money at that time, that was 5 times 6pence. So I went home with 3 shillings. But you'll be happy to know that I didn't make any more money of writing and telling stories until I was in my late 30s. I think it was karma coming around.
Booklist has said of your books that it's like reading Thackeray, edited by Elmore Leonard.
I wish that could be true. I'm still working on that, but it's very nice of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
That's what's called setting the bar so high that you make the person really stretch up to try to make it true.
Now, you said to me that you write 3 books a year.
Well, you know, I'm getting older and time's getting shorter. I've got still an awful lot of stories I want to tell. Unfortunately, they say that they will take 3 books a year, but what they do is say, well, you know, there will be a contract and it'll come and it'll come and it'll come. And then in October they say, yes, right, please, we would like 3 books. Maybe have the first one yesterday. So this time I'm trying to get ahead of the mark. They said, we would like the first one, I think it was by February. So I said, right, there you are, because it was February when the contract came through. And then they want the next one by the end of July, 31st of July, and the last one on the 1st of August. That's what known as a long dark night. But I have actually turned them both in now, because I've got other plans for the rest of August.
I feel like a real slug. Trying to write 1 book a year is difficult for me, but...
Well, maybe you have other things you have to do. You see, I don't do anything else.
Yeah.
Not a thing. I had no side talents.
So, reading Death on Blackheath, I felt a real resonance with today's world, because the issues give it a contemporary feel, even though we're in the late Victorian era. I think we're, what, 1898?
Yes.
And maybe it's because Pitt's now head of the special branch, so he's been head of the special branch for about 8 books now.
Well, yes, but I'm having to fit several more books in per year. Otherwise, I'm going to finish up within 70, and I haven't finished it. So he gets 2 or 3 or 4 adventures in a year.
Yeah, I find I have to do that too, because I still want them to pay in francs. And in 2000, we're going to start paying in euros, which is really boring.
Well, I want to make sure that he's still not so old that he's beginning to show it a bit. And also, I want to stick in there before we've got too much forensic science.
Exactly.
So it's still having to just deduce rather than have positive scientists. but still before the use of fingerprints. Obviously they were there, but we didn't use them in criminal ways, and we don't know yet the difference between blood types and that sort of thing. So it's still very much a novel that happened to have a crime in it.
But maybe it's because of Pitts now had a special branch and he's responsible for the country's security. But I immediately, spies, secret documents, terrorists, Snowden, right?
Bombers.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very contemporary, and I think earlier in your workshop you were talking about finding things in today's headlines that
Absolutely.
also resonate.
Because the basic human story doesn't change. And I had one story where I wanted to think about people with telephone conversations tapped. Well, of course, there was no way of doing that in his time. They did have telephones, but not many people had them, and it wasn't a conversational thing the way it is now. So I decided to have the police given permission to interview people's servants without the people knowing. And just imagine what power that would give to servants. I'm sure you'd like to give me a raise, wouldn't you, sir? I just had this very interesting conversation with a policeman yesterday, and he's coming back tomorrow. You would, wouldn't you? Oh yes, I certainly would, because bits of overheard conversations, which applies equally to today and to any time, when you hear part of a conversation or one side of it, doesn't it sometimes turn out to be totally different when you hear the other side? I mean, if the answer is yes, well, what was the question? It makes an awful lot of difference what the question was, doesn't it? And you can get totally the wrong story if you overhear half the conversation.
Right.
It's terribly dangerous.
Let's talk about Pitt's responsibilities. You were telling me that because he's head of special branch, which this is a term still used today in the UK, he does the action, he's the judge, he's the jury, sometimes he's the executioner. All this power that he has, and he was a beat policeman.
Well, he was a detective, and when you're a detective, you have to find out the truth, which can be very harrowing sometimes, very sad, but once you've got the evidence and you've arrested somebody, you then pass it over to the courts. And they try the person, they weigh the evidence to decide innocent or guilty, and then the judge decides what happens to the person. But if you're a special branch, you can't afford to go through that. I can remember saying some time ago to my brother, I wish that I could have a court of star chamber, which is a secret trial, which you have to do with traitors and spies and people like that, because the last thing you want is to have the whole thing aired in public. You mean you might as well, they don't need to do their job if you're going to air the whole thing in public anyway. I thought that would be a wonderful sort of secret trial to have, because all sorts of things can go wrong when the public has no idea what's going on. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, please, if we now know that somebody is in that sort of a situation, we just get rid of them." Well, of course we do. Yes, get rid of them. We terminate them with extreme prejudice.
Yes.
Yes, we don't have a secret trial and all the rest of it. And this is what Pitt's situation is. He has to find out who is doing whatever it is, and if it does involve betrayal of secrets, it may be that we can't afford to have that person come to trial, and we certainly can't afford to have them testify of certain things. I mean, we all know what dreadful things can happen when people let slip things that they shouldn't do. And so sometimes there's no time to get a warrant or to arrest somebody. They can have done their damage by that time. So Pitt has a very great responsibility on occasion of having to act. And there's nobody who can stop and ask their opinion or weigh the evidence and decide. Because by the time he's done that, the bomb has blown up the place or whatever it might happen to be. And the responsibility is not something that he wants to have to do. But if you act and you make a mistake, you're in trouble. If you don't act and somebody does something as a result of your not stopping them, you're responsible for that too. One of my favorite sayings as a starting point for a story is that all that is necessary for evil to come to pass is for good men to do nothing. And sometimes doing nothing looks like a very easy way out. It's not, because by doing nothing, you are complicit in whatever happens afterwards.
Right, you're making a choice.
You're making a choice, and you want to say, well, stop the world, I want to get off. I'm sorry, you can't get off, you're here for the duration. And that's a very hard and difficult situation sometimes for people. And Pitt is not a man who is comfortable in this. And if you're going to make a good, tight, hard story, put your favourite characters in a situation where they're uncomfortable.
That's right. We'll be talking all about that all weekend.
Yeah.
And he's sort of this fish out of water, even though he's married Charlotte, who's from the upper classes.
Yes.
There's a special branch in this whole world of ministries and the prime minister. These people have gone to the right schools. And he is.
They know each other. They're probably related.
Yeah.
It's a very, very fine writer, an American woman called Barbara Tuchman. You're probably familiar with her.
Yeah.
Her stuff is absolutely marvelous. But she pointed out in The Proud Tower, which somehow I wound up with 4 or 5 copies of, that in Britain during the 19th century, it was the thing for the aristocracy to go into government. It was what was expected of them. It was part of their privilege and their duty. And in America, the aristocracy did not get involved in politics. They felt it was not their place, it was kind of beneath them. And so it's a very different sort of ruling class. And many of the British ones, they certainly had aristocratic privileges and sense of importance, but also the sense of duty and obligation. And it's good and bad in all decisions, but they were apparently different. And I trust her research. I think she's very interesting, very thorough, extremely readable.
I was so happy to see Stoker in this, that he has some ally, and Stoker is really kind of one-minded and does a lot of things, above and beyond. And Pitt's Pitt's beginning to trust him, which I thought that was a real interesting little nuance there.
Well, it comes from the previous story where there was nobody he could trust. Or previous or one before that, recent anyway. When there was nobody he could trust, when Narroway was being got at, and actually lost his job, and Pitt was the replacement. He's trying to fill shoes that are a lot larger than his feet at the moment, and these are growing pains of his feet to fill the shoes.
So we've got all the 29 Pitt novels. So when you were thinking of writing this book, this particular, Blackheath, were you thinking of this theme about, espionage, or was this something you've been thinking about, that's been percolating, or you felt that Pitt would be addressing this kind of issue down the road?
Well, actually, the theme that occupied my mind was that there is no way any of us can go through life without incurring debts of honor. And I don't mean financial ones, but somebody does you a favor, somebody helps you when you need it, or helps somebody you love when they desperately need it. And then time goes by, and finally they come to you and say, remember how I helped you at such and such, when I'd like your help now. Now, that is okay if it's something that you're able to do, something of your own that you sacrifice. But what if what they ask you to do is something that's betraying your country? You have to find a way out of it and still pay your debts of honor. And sometimes that's almost impossibly difficult.
Right.
And it was, you cannot go through life without ever accepting help from other people. It isn't possible. Let us say your beloved only child needs a kidney transplant, and you're not a match. But somebody comes forward and says, I am, here, have mine. You're not going to say, oh, no, because they know you. But maybe 10 years after that, when your child is well and strong, they say, I've got a real problem, can you help me? And that may be something that you consider dishonorable, but they don't, and you do owe them.
Like a moral dilemma.
Yes. Well, moral dilemmas are what good stories are made of, aren't they? You get somebody that there's no easy answer. If there's an easy answer, well, what's the story?
Right. We don't want to turn the page.
No, it's the conflict, the feeling that there, for the grace of God, goes anybody, and this could so easily happen. And you're not going to say, no, I won't take the kidney to save my child because I might one day owe this person. You just say, thank you, thank you, thank you, and take it.
So, Charlotte and Thomas Pitt, I mean, these characters have moved forward in time in their family. They've had growing children. So I believe you started around 1881.
Absolutely.
And now we're up to 98.
Yes.
1898.
I'm on 99.
All right. Well, you started your next book. Like, after you finish 3 books in a year. Yes, okay. So let's talk a little bit about backstory, logistics. How do you keep up with this, with all the people that are, the various different characters and their backstory,
Well, I know Charlotte and Thomas pretty well. And some of the other stories, I'm afraid I bring new people in because I can't remember what I did with the old ones. I think if I had half a brain, I would have made notes, but I didn't. I trust to remember. But there are some people which, I mean, and I know perfectly well that Aunt Vespasian has grown younger with time.
Why not? Why
Yes,
not?
yes. When I introduced her in about the fourth one, she was meant to sort of walk across the page and be fun and leave. And I found myself more and more engaged with her. To begin with, I identified with Charlotte. And then as time went by, I identified with their mother, Caroline. Now I identify with her great aunt, Vespasian. There's passage of time will do that for you. But she's more fun anyway, actually.
Yeah, very elegant. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. She's who I would like to be. She's who a lot of people would like to be.
What about the clothing, you know, and the details of the kitchen life? And I read somewhere that you were talking about how do you set a scene, how do you show the different classes in society and move the story forward with information that needs to happen or a dialogue that needs to take place? You know, you were talking about the irons, you know, what are those irons where they put the coals in them? And
well, those and the flat irons, where you
Flat
put them
irons.
on the hob
Yeah.
and let them get hot. You have to be a very good judge of temperatures. There's no dial on it to tell you how hot it is.
the hob is a stove?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Well, I think it's a bit clumsy to say, you know, suburb of London, 1893, and headlines. People need to feel where they are without being hit over the head with it. And, you know, it's a bit clunky to have a newspaper around with the date on it. You get a feel of period by what people are doing. If they are clearing away the table and putting the dishes in the dishwashing machine, you have a fair idea where and when they are.
Right.
But if if they get out the vacuum to sweep the floor, then you've at least got a ballpark area. If they've got one of these self-propelling things, you know that's very modern indeed. If they get out a whisk broom and a dustpan and brush, you know you're going back a bit. If they sprinkle wet brown on the carpet and then brush it up, you're going back a little further more. Of course, if you've got not a carpet but straw before you're way back. And lighting can help a lot too, to give you the feeling that you're there, not just that you're told this is where you are.
Right, right, sensory detail.
Yes, but you can do this while you're having a conversation about something that matters.
And what do you, but okay, I know Balzac, who wrote the comedy, the human comedy, he made like a family tree, and I went to the museum, and he had like a wall covered with all the different families and who was related, and it really helps, you know. Do you ever consider doing that, or their genealogy?
I consider all sorts of clever things like that, and then I don't do it. I'm a storyteller. I want you to care about the people that you're meeting right now, and you'll fill in the details that are necessary. A little bit, I've at last learned to hold backstory until you need to know it. You do not need backstory in the first chapter. You need to engage with somebody that you like, who wants something and is having trouble getting it. Is being chased or who desperately wants to get something that keeps eluding them, and you need to know why they want it, and you need to care that they get it. And then you can fill in some, as long as you know where they are. And if you're going to describe somebody, do it the first time you meet them, because if you're any good at it at all, your reader will fill in what they look like for themselves. And by the time they've got a petite blonde with curly hair, and you've actually got a 6-foot brunette, you know, you kind of spoil the image.
Do you outline?
Yes, in great detail.
What's great detail to you?
Well, the one I'm working on at the moment, since I had to do quite a bit of rewrite in the last one, which was take out a whole plot and put in a different one, I'm determined this time that I will get it right the first time, at least on those major points. So I have got, I think it's 15 chapters, and I've got about 2 pages for each one, single-spaced.
Single-spaced.
And I've now taken it out, and I've got the chapters with bullet points of what happens in this, and I'm tidying it, I'm going to make it tighter, and I've got backstory for all the major characters, and next thing I'm going to do is write it out again, which will be the 5th time, and try to get my big scenes in, and get so that I know why everybody did whatever they did. Because it's when you don't know why they did something, or you've got a contradiction in it, that you have to go back and rewrite it again, making sense.
So you took out a whole plot line.
I did, yes.
I had to do that once.
And does it hurt?
It was painful.
It's like I'm picking stitches after an operation. I've never done that, I can imagine.
But it was so much better after. It was so tight,
Yes,
you know?
yes,
You could, pounce something off. It
Huh.
gets tight and it
By
moves.
making a bed with the bottom sheet so tight you can bounce a penny on it.
There you go.
Yes, instead
What
of
was
being
this
sitting
you
out of
did?
sight forever.
Take out a whole plot line,
Oh.
as Ann did.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was very difficult. I realized when the criticisms came through, constructive criticism from my agent, that it depended upon a coincidence that was not. You can have one coincidence per story, I think.
Can you say that again, Ann, so we all hear?
Sorry,
One coincidence?
I think one coincidence per story,
Near the beginning, right?
near the beginning, yes.
That's all you're allowed. Okay, sorry. Yes.
Well, after that, it becomes unbelievable, honestly. And I know people say incredible and unbelievable, meaning that it's of great magnitude. Well, incredible means it cannot be credited. Unbelievable means you can't believe it.
Right.
Therefore, if it's unbelievable, forget it, because
Talk about the Malaysian airliner, remember, that disappeared over the Indian Ocean a few Malaysian flights ago? I mean, we have the black box, we have, satellites. No one, you couldn't have written that story and said that no one could ever find that plane, but it really happened.
yes.
Doesn't mean it belongs in fiction, but
That's the thing. Truth is stranger than fiction. I'll tell you a very small story. I live in the very far northeast of Scotland. My family comes from the Midlands, Manchester area, and my father went to university in Cambridge, which is towards the south. My stepbrother's daughter lives right on the south coast. Her boyfriend, a few years ago, came up with he found a book, The Complete Works of George Bernard Shaw, and in the front was a name that was given as a prize, and the name of the person who won that particular prize was there. And he said to my stepbrother's daughter, "Hey, was that your grandfather's name?" Yes. Could this possibly be him? It was the book that he was given as a prize before I was born.
to your father,
To my father, and it fetched up, miles and miles and miles away, and they bought it, and they gave it to me for my 17th birthday.
Wow.
The book with my father's name in it, and the Keys College thing, and Smith Rice 19, whatever it was.
Oh my.
But I mean, if you put that into a story, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But it does happen to be true. Lots of times, the truth is uncreditable in a story. I don't mean discreditable. I mean, you cannot believe it.
right. Can you talk about Charlotte, because I like her a lot. She's a crusader and she's kind of kick-a, sort of.
Big man.
What do you call those high-buttoned boots?
Oh, yes, yes.
And she, she's been a little more prominent in some of the stories, and some she's
She
pulling
kind
back.
of leaps in things afterwards, a bit like me.
Yeah, really?
Well, don't you honestly, everyone here who writes, don't many of your characters have something of you in them? Yes, they do. When I started off identifying with Charlotte, and then, I kind of got older faster than she did, so I moved to her mother. I couldn't stay there very long because Caroline's really not much like me. So I moved on ahead to Vespasia, dragged her back there to make her younger.
Yeah,
She's not going to die of old age. She's going to hang around until she's, finished.
we like her. That's good. Well, but Charlotte is a wife, a mother,
Yes.
from the upper class. So she married down. She had a lot of, family issues. Marrying Pitt, and
Her
she
parents were just glad they found somebody who would have her. She had a big mouth.
right.
And she wasn't a very suitable sort of wife for the sort of man she should have married.
But she's also his access to this other world, right?
Yes, she is, and she doesn't have the money that her sister has. She doesn't have the social access, but she is never bored. And I just read in Quote of the Day, within the last 7 days, in order to be happy, human beings need to have a purpose. They need to have something that they're striving for, working for. She has. And if you have all the things that you think you want, very often you find that there's still something missing because you're not working for something. She is working for something, and Emily envies her that.
I know, that's a real contrast
Yes.
with Emily. Emily has grown in this book.
Yes, she has.
Yeah, little lines appearing. I was very
Yes.
worried about Emily's complexion.
Unfortunately, we do find the little lines come. And sometimes even bigger ones come. But if they come going in the right direction, that's okay. You know the saying that at 20 you have the face nature gave you, at 50 you have the one you deserve. Is that a terrible thought? But it's true. If you can find an old face that's still beautiful, you've got a beautiful somebody inside it.
I have to say, when I was reading this book, I do live in San Francisco, and in summer we have tons of fog, right? So I'm always cold. But I was really cold reading this book because I had to get the blankets out, you know, more than, you know, and because the
Shows you've got a very empathetic imagination.
I was totally there, and oh, that gravel pit and the wet pants, and oh, just, they have to
Oh,
hug.
gonna be nice.
Oh yeah, it was like, the poor man, that those handsome cabs aren't heated.
No, well, they're open. Wouldn't be the point of meeting.
But don't they have little warmers for their feet?
Sometimes, but not for the police on duty.
Oh, that's barbaric.
Well, for those of you who haven't read it, if they find a body in an old gravel pit where the shallower pools of ice over.
I mean, don't they even have like heated bricks that they can put their
You might have some heated bricks in there. It covers, of course, wrapped in blankets. But if you are going to be British, you have to learn that you'll get on fire and singe the front of your legs and freeze the back of them.
Okay.
Or move to California.
I mean, I identified with Charlotte for different reasons, maybe because she's a wife and a mother and she's, you know, very, you know, out there. But she's upper class and that has no resonance for me. So how do you kind of bring that to make it so real on the page, you know, and to show us with deft skill of, you know, moving in the society, and her home is definitely not, you know,
Well, actually,
radio square or whatever.
the British class system is much more fluid than many people think.
Really?
People seem to think that if you started off reasonably poor, for example, my mother, I think pretty well was a lady. I don't mean that she had a title, she didn't, but she knew how to behave. She could be presented to the Queen and know how to behave herself. But her father was a chaplain in the army during World War I, and his mother was married to he wasn't even a minor, he weighed coal at the pit head, and she couldn't write her name. On his birth, my grandfather's birth certificate, there's a cross because she couldn't write, not even her name. But he got a scholarship to Cambridge in divinity and became a minister.
Wow.
And my father, just going back to my paternal grandfather, he was a railway porter for some of the time, then got a small shop selling toys. But my father got a scholarship to Cambridge, and he matriculated at 13, and you know, the sky was the ceiling. If you've got brains and you've got hard work and you apply yourself, there isn't a limit to what you probably wouldn't be likely. Well, if you were a beautiful woman, you might marry a duke, but you're not likely to become a duke in a hurry. And if you were made a duke, well, he wouldn't be made a duke. If he were knighted and sent, you know, higher up and possibly even made a lord, it doesn't make you a gentleman. If you're just not a gentleman, it's really your taste, your behaviour, but the length of your view towards the future and the past. But every society I've ever heard of has its class system. It just may not be based on birth. It may be based upon your race or your money or the families you belong to. But human beings do sort themselves out as to who's a leader and who's not. And you have famous families here who have fortunes that couldn't even begin to count, and their children inherit them. And a lot of families have a dynastic feeling of right towards place in government, or a great deal of money. We tend to lose our money quite a lot because we have very high death taxes. But I mean, human beings do sort themselves out. There are leaders and there are those who prefer not to lead.
Tony Broadbent, a lot of us know him, great writer, who's now decamped to North Carolina for some reason. But Tony's British. He talks a lot about when British people start speaking, you can immediately label where they are in society.
And where they come from.
Right.
Yeah. You can tie them down to which village they come from if you're really good at that.
Wow.
I can remember being stuck in the airport in Toronto, and it was for hours because there was a delay or something had happened. And I was wandering around this shop. I didn't want to buy anything because they were not things I would have used or could afford or could carry with me. But I struck up a conversation because I like talking to people. And this young man was a Canadian who said he could, no, he wasn't, he was an American. And he said that he could tell where people came from just with a few words. And I thought, I bet he can't. And because I've lived in many, many different places. And I had been in several different places by the time I was 8 and left Britain. And he said, Kent. He was right. I must have kept either Kentish words, when that part of London which is in Kent, or something, but he knew. And you can, but if you're a good linguist, you could probably place an American, unless they moved around. I've moved around since I was 8, and before that too. But there's something that is there, but it is a skill. And yes, you can put them to their social class, them, us, me, to the social class, unless you've taken elocution lessons and can learn how to speak well. But there used to be a time when people took a pride in speaking as well as possible, and in the pleasantness of their voice, and then it became very much the thing to keep a regional accent, which are very different, and some of them are almost impossible to understand. And they do have their own, I mean, it's an old country, they have their own words. Maybe when you have a real bad fog here, I would say, ach, it's dreich today. Ach, it's dreich today.
Dreich. What was that other word you taught me? Thought? What was it? T-H-E?
Thrawn. Oh, if somebody is thrawn, they're always going in the opposite direction. And dealing with them is like trying to saw through wood across the grain instead of with it.
T-H-R-A-W-E.
Thrawn. There are lots of good words. Oh, and in Scotland, if you've got a teenager that's like most teenagers, their bedroom is probably a burch.
I'm sure that we have a lot of those.
They're all in there. And it's, you don't get here without going through there, so to speak. But if I say it's an absolute burch, you get an idea of what I mean. You don't think it's neat and tidy, do you? I think it's probably, if you go up in the cupboard and have a pile of dirty clothes fall out of me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about different points of view? Because, you know, you're right, it's man and a woman and different classes. And a lot of us here are thinking about using the, first person, the I, or the close third person, and different. Can you talk about that? I mean, was that a conscious decision?
Yes, it was very much a conscious decision, because upstairs and downstairs see things very differently, and men and women see things very differently. These days, women can get most places, but still, I think, girls, if you've got a room full of women talking, wouldn't the conversation change completely if a man came in? And haven't you looked at men and thought sometimes, doesn't he see what she's doing? Come on, now wake up. And I bet that men have exactly the same experience. A room full of men. The conversation will be different if a woman comes in.
Is that true?
Stop talking.
Stop talking. That's why it's silent, right?
Don't you sometimes look at a man and think, or look at a woman and think, come on, can't you see what he's doing to you? Girl, grow up. You swallow that line? Because we can read each other in a way that the other gender doesn't.
Most men aren't that observant and are too self-absorbed. Takes one to know one.
Yeah. You can make your hero any way you want him, but if he's not believable, you've lost the audience. But if you have a male observer and a female observer, they are going to get different sides of the story, and you're going to have a binocular view. And there's a good reason we've got two eyes and not just one. It gives us perspective and a whole lot of other things, and that's why I like to have at least two different points of view. If you're restricted to one point of view, you get a depth of emotion, but you might get a narrowness of vision, because without having somebody have complete contortions of behavior, you're not going to get them every place it's interesting and that you need to know to get a rounded story.
Exactly.
And so it's definitely a choice.
Yeah, I do that too, because Amy just can't cover all the parents by herself. No. Yeah. And I want to have different people's experiences,
But it's a big and beautiful and complex city.
Yeah, and we see the dark side of this.
Yeah.
As Laurie King once said, Cara, you write about the darker side of the city of light. And I said, Laurie, I'm going to use that.
Yes.
But yeah, so we, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about. We had the Ripper was a bit earlier than this, in the early 1880s. 1880s.
I came just before you can go through them afterwards.
So we've got this squalid, Victorian gaslight London that we people know about. I mean,
But the front door and the back door of the same house, possibly. Yes, we have gaslight and handsome cabs and gorgeous clothes and desperate poverty.
Right.
So different from today. Afraid not.
Yeah,
But yes, it's a little more romantic because it's a little bit further removed.
right.
And if you can't make romance out of hansom cabs and gaslights, you really well trying.
Right, it's this whole time, I remember I went on the River tour in London and it was really different. It wasn't sensationalized. It was talking about the sociological levels and that these women were, it was just terrible what happened to them, and they were kind of on the bottom rung, and yet
Very well.
and there was this whole fascination with
Well, there were lots of rumours of a royal connection, and it couldn't possibly have been the Duke of Clarence. He was, recorded by many people 300 miles away. But it is possible that it was Prince Eddie who had a connection with this young woman who was not Annie Crook. But the thing was that it said that she had a child and that they had a morganatic marriage. Morganatic means that the wife does not take the title of the husband. But the thing was that she was Catholic. And we have an Act of Settlement which says that no Catholic can accede to the throne. And that comes from the time when the Reformation, Henry became Church of England, and then his daughter Mary, known as Bloody Mary, and then executed all people who changed from Catholic to being Protestant, and had them burned alive and goodness knows what. And there was an awful lot of very horrible stuff that went on. And then there were Catholic plots to assassinate Elizabeth I and so forth. So it was said, and it sounds awfully difficult, but do you want a president whose first loyalty is to Rome, not to the United States?
Yep.
I don't think you do you?
That's what they said when Kennedy was running.
Yes. But that depends. At that particular time, it was believed that the Catholics had to make a covenant, first of all, to obey the Pope. So the first loyalty was to Rome. Well, you can't serve two masters, can you? Not effectively. I don't know how much that actually had to do, but there were an awful lot of burnings and killings and nastinesses going on.
Right, and at this time, London was like the largest port in the world. I mean, there was the Empire.
In the 1880s, yes.
And there was the Empire. I mean,
Would you know, I believe, having read it fairly recently, that still 1 in 4 people in the world is part of the British Commonwealth. I mean, it doesn't mean we rule over them, they're their choice.
Right.
But
yeah, the Commonwealth Games just opened in Scotland. Yes, it was on the news, and Rod Stewart sang. And the Queen was there. But yeah.
yes, but it was at that time. When we say the empire in which the sun never set, we don't mean it was going to last forever. We just mean it was right around the world, which happens to be round. So it's always always day somewhere.
Exactly.
We've
Yeah.
got delusions of grandeur, but not quite.
But there was an optimism too. There was this energy. I mean, this was. There were people coming from all over the world.
There's a feeling that there's a problem. Never mind, we'll sort it. I think that could be why I sell so much better in America than I do at home, because America has an optimism. You have this attitude. Never mind, we'll sort it. We can do it. That is extremely admirable. I think that if you believe you can solve a problem, you probably can. If you believe you can't, you won't try, so you certainly can't. And that attitude was good. I'm glad you raised that.
Yeah. Well, and we're coming to the end of Victoria's reign. She's older. There's going to be like the New World. We're going to New World, different history. We got the beginnings of World War I that's going to start.
We've got terrible shadows on the horizon, and Europe had so much anarchy and terrorism. It was just, and some of the punishments were absolutely unspeakable. And of course, you've got the Dreyfus affair, which is just terrifying stuff.
Yeah, it still resonates today.
Yes, and it resonates with a lot of the problems that we have today. And bombings were the big thing all over the place.
The anarchists. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that we can all understand what it's like to be afraid that you walk in a doorway and everything will blow up. We don't change much.
Sadly not. Just one more thing, and then let you all ask questions. You talk about, in this on your website and on your video, putting your heart on the page, and I think for a lot of us, that's where we want to go. Can you talk about that?
Well, I think that there are lots of things that can be taught to you. If your punctuation's not great, your editor will pick it up. Mine does. my punctuation's lousy. If you need a few grammatical, syntactical corrections here and there, if you need plot holes tightening, if you need to make your research a little better, if you need to improve your dialogue, you can learn all of these things. But if you haven't got passion, if you don't care about the issues, the people, then don't write. Because it's that passion that's going to ignite the reader, and they can get over the little mistakes. Editors can fix them. If you care, if when we open up the page and we read about your character, we think, I understand this person. I want them to get what they want. I want them to escape this problem. I want them to find happiness. I really care. That's because you, the writer, have cared. You put your own heart on the page. And you haven't pretended to cover it up with cleverness. You're just honest. And we're right with you. And that's what I think you need to put into any story. Put your real emotions, be simple. I've said this before, I know, but keep your language as simple as you possibly can and still retain your meaning. I can remember being in a church meeting and the young man said, as we take our departure for our various destinations, for heaven's sake, as we go home. You know, the simple language, and I was taught a very long time ago, if you can use the Anglo-Saxon rooted word rather than the Latin or Norman French, use it. These are the simple words that cover what we think of, what we care about. Home, the fields, the hedges, love, hate, the simple things, food, house, dog. The words that name the things that are part of our daily life, that are the core of who we are. Use those words when they're appropriate. Use the great big polysyllabic ones when they matter. But if you are really suffering something, you don't say, I am tormented by the anguishes of whatever. You say, I hurt. When somebody cares intensely, they use the simplest words they can find. That carries the reader immediately to the heart and the core of it, which is where you want them. And you don't need to say, you know, the bright tears were shining on her pallid cheeks or whatever. She wept. That's what you say when you're caught up in it, when you really mean it. You don't stop and look at the glistening tears, whatever. You choke. You say, I can't. Or no, no, no. When somebody hears bad news, they say, oh no. They don't say, oh, I can't believe it's such a terrible thing. So. You say, oh no.
Have you ever cried when you wrote?
Yes.
I have too.
Yeah. Yes, you get rid of a favourite character. The most ridiculous thing I've done is, it was a character, it was in the war stories, and the character wasn't even really dead. And I knew that, but the reader didn't. The most moving line I think I've ever read was in the fourth one of the war stories, when it covers the Battle of Passchendaele, which any of you war historians know went on for quite a long time, 1917. But at the end of the first day, the following morning, after the first day of Passchendaele, one of the men came to my chaplain, Joseph, and said, we lost the major last night, and this one yesterday, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And of course we lost his brother in the spring, you know, both his cousins and so on and so forth, and on and on and on. And Joseph said, how many? 50,000. This summer? No, sir. Yesterday. You know, and yes, I get tears streaming down my face because I know that's true. 50,000 yesterday.
Slaughter.
Yes.
I think we're all tearing up here.
But that's okay. We're supposed to be feeling. If you can hear that and it doesn't do anything to you, you should lie down because we should start you should start moving quickly because they'll think you're dead.
Right. Okay, you know this woman is a master. I mean, come on, you must have questions for her. Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
I am a huge admirer of William Monk. Wonderful three-dimensional character.
Thank you.
You've been here at least twice before.
At least.
And I don't know why I didn't ask you this question, so I have to ask now. What was your inspiration in developing this wonderful character?
What's your inspiration
Yes.
for developing Monk?
Yes, what was the inspiration for developing Monk? Just in case the people way back can't hear what you said. I heard you, but I'm repeating it for them. I had a dream in which I shared a house that was joined in the middle with somebody that I was always quarreling with, and yet somehow or another I knew he'd never hurt me. And that was half of what he was like. But the other half is, are we not always looking for the monster outside when something awful happens? And imagine how it must be if you've pursued a monster for some time and you come to wonder, is that person me? Because Monk woke up when he had lost his memory completely. And the book is called, it's the first one, it's called Face of a Stranger, because when he looks at it in the looking glass, who the hell's that?
Yeah.
And he begins to, he daren't tell anybody, because there's no social services to pick him up and look after him at that time. We got ours just after World War II, most of the major social services. And he has to make his way. And he realizes that he is disliked, and he doesn't know why, because he can't remember anything, but he still has his detective skills, and I believe with amnesia you do keep your skills. And he has to detect who he is, and who his friends are, and who his enemies are, and at the same time try and find out who committed a pretty gruesome crime. And the more he pursues it, the more it looks as if the person he's looking for this crime is himself. And he has no memory. But doesn't every thinking person try to learn more about their own identity? Who am I? Where do I fit in with things? I know what I mean, but I don't know how other people see me. And that to me is the core of most thinking people at some time or another will say, well, who am I? Because this person sees me one way and that person sees me another way. And I know something in the middle, but the things I don't remember, because nobody remembers everything. How many people here can tell me what they were doing last Tuesday in the middle of, the last Tuesday in January 15 years ago? Of course you can't, neither can I. I don't even know what country I was in that time. But it's a search for identity. And I make him a complex and not very pleasant person, because if we were to go back and find somebody who knew us 15 years ago that we maybe didn't like, we might find they didn't like us either, and their opinion of us was so different from our opinion of us. Because what you see from the inside can be very, very different from what other people see on the outside. And they can misunderstand things like crazy. You know what, facts will tell you what you did, but only you know why you did it. And it may have been seen totally reasonably at the time.
Yes.
I'd really like to know about your work habits, and do you write every single day and every night, and how do you do this?
I don't write on Sundays. I don't even think about work on Sundays. I do keep a Sabbath. But other than that, morning, afternoon, and sometimes evening, sometimes you get very good ideas when you're watching something on television or reading something else or whatever, or just doing housework. But I do get consumed by a story, especially when I know I've got to turn it into by a certain date if I expect to be paid. It concentrates the mind wonderfully. But I get enthused. I'm not going to live long enough to write all the things I want to write. Even if I've got another 20 years. There's so much to do. I had a tremendous class of people today. 12 of them, and they came up, every one of them came up with good ideas for every question. And they have at least 36 different stories to write. And all of them were morally complex and interesting. And the headlines give you stories pretty well every day. If you were this person or that person, then you take it and run and think, well, what if I found this, and how would I react to that? And what would that person do? And if it wasn't this one, was it that one? And how would it affect me if it was, or were?
Just made me think of a red herring. Thank you.
Yes.
Later. Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned headlines and TV shows. Are there other things you do to generate ideas?
I don't read books that are set in the times I write in, because I would be afraid that I might even unconsciously copy somebody without realizing I was doing it. And also, if I have a cracking good idea, I want to know I didn't nick it from somebody else, and I can still use it. But television and the news headlines, whether it's on television or on the iPad or in the newspaper or any other way, that can provide me with all I can cope with. I don't like to borrow things from the lives of people I know, but possibly attitudes, yes, or appearances, Or if you, for example, go to church every Sunday for many years, you get to see families over a period of time, and you get to know people in one aspect of them really quite well. And you watch how things change and how people copy their parents. It doesn't, church happens to be the community that I've seen over 20 years in the same area, but it could be any community that you see regularly. It could be the people you ride to work on the train opposite or whatever. And you watch how they change and you see how people belong and are affected by the families that they have. Anything that you see or hear, as long as you don't take a real person's life and abuse it by making them recognizable villain. Or imagining that you know why people always do what they do.
I think crime writers have a license to eavesdrop.
Well, you need a license.
You need a well, you need a license. I mean, I think we're always listening, you know, wherever.
We're always listening, watching.
Yeah, listening, watching, writing down that little word, you know, just catching a nuance or
You can't help it.
Huh?
You can't help it.
No, it's a disease.
Yes, people.
All these people share this disease.
Yes, we're communicating the disease.
How about one more question and then Anne can sign books?
Yeah.
I didn't have quite a question. I'll make it very fast so they can get it. I just wanted to say it, to emphasize that thought of the noblesse oblige.
Noblesse oblige?
Yes. And that for instance, Downton Abbey. They take care of everybody in that community, and that even if they're wealthy, they take care of the whole set.
That's how the feudal system used to be. You owed your allegiance to the Lord, and he owed his allegiance to you. You worked in his fields, and he protected you and fed you in hard times.
Right.
It's supposed to work both ways.
Both ways, exactly. And I see now there's this discrepancy now where people have a lot of money. And they think they're lords, but they have no concept of the community whatsoever.
It's a very acute observation, that actually. That is true.
And it's like a good plot line, isn't it?
Yes, with privilege comes obligation.
Comes obligation, and they don't even know it exists.
Yes, sir, you were going to say something.
Yeah, this is kind of maybe a particularly American question, but I came to...
We're in America, feel free.
I came to the big series through audiobooks because I spent a huge amount of time driving. And the stories are so compelling and the characters are so good. What I keep asking myself is, has anybody approached you about optioning those for actually it's something the BBC would do very well. Is
the BBC have passed on that one, but I have a very nice producer from Los Angeles who likes to live in London, and I'm in London who likes to live in Los Angeles, we get on very well, who has optioned all the bits. Watch this space.
Well, we will look forward to that with anticipation and pleasure.
Thank you very much, and thank you all.
Thank you very much.